Hello, and welcome to Games You'll Soon Play. I'm your host, Liam Gallagher. In this episode, I interview Jonathan Semple, developer for BR Warner Studios and Invisible Locomotive. In this interview, we talk about his biography, what he's up to now, and what we can expect from him in the future. I want to take the opportunity to encourage all our listeners in the GTA, that's the Greater Toronto Area, not the Grand Theft Auto, to check out the release party for In a Flash, coming at the end of September in downtown Toronto. There you'll have an opportunity to hear live music played by myself and a merry band of adventurous performers taken from the games of BR Warner Studios and Invisible Locomotive, as well as get an opportunity to play the new games and get some sneak peeks on upcoming titles from the studio. You can get all the latest information on that event and others at brwarner.net. Also, follow me at LiamG25. That's Liam G Roman numeral 25 for all those latest updates. I'm also on Facebook at /TheLiamGallagher, and you can find me at theliamgallagher.com. Okay, let's get to the interview. Sorry, John. I have with me on the line Jonathan Semple. Hey, how are you doing today?
All right.
Thanks so much for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Yeah, no problem.
So, are you excited to talk about video games?
Generally, I usually am, yeah.
Okay, good. So, can you introduce yourself to the listeners a little bit?
Sure. So, I'm Jonathan Semple. I just recently finished my undergrad at the University of Waterloo, computer science. Took me a while, but it's finally done. And I've been interested in making games for quite some time. I've been involved with the undergraduate game development club at UW for the last 6 years or something like that. 6 years. Recently I've done a lot of... I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry.
It's okay. There's always editing, right?
Yeah. So recently I've done some tinkering around with tabletop RPGs on my own time, and I've done some solo video game development as well. But in the last year, I've been doing a lot more work with Brooke and Ryan and the rest of this team, and getting more group experience, I guess.
So just as a quick aside,
yeah.
Did you do any co-ops or work placements anywhere?
I wasn't in co-op. I did a couple research assistantships, not game related, at the university a few years back. For the last couple years, I've been doing some part-time contract work with a local company that focus on gamified e-learning. And they're willing to pay me to make stupid, simple, casual games that integrate into their platform. So I've been doing that. It's not the most interesting work. It's not the most interesting sort of games, but it is paying work that's game development. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess everybody's career's got to start somewhere, and I found that on a lot of the tasks that seemed menial, I've often learned some of the most important lessons that I've been able to then apply to my projects of passion.
Yeah, for sure.
So, beyond your education and your work experience, what are some of the games that you've put together?
So recently, of course, I've been working on Sunshine, and we did Mango Death Squad, or whatever we're going to call it as the final name. Don't think we've really decide on that. For now, it's just Mango Death Squad. It's not even Mango Death Squad, it's Mango Death Wish. What am I talking about? Anyways, Mango Death Wish and Sunshine. Aside from that, I did We're All Going to Die with Brooke and Ryan last fall. Worked on Rat Killer with Brooke and Daniel and Emily and Steven. And before that, or aside from that, I guess on my own, I've been playing around with a couple pen and paper tabletop role-playing game designs. I've been pretty interested in sort of an indie system called Apocalypse World. And Apocalypse World encourages people to make their own hacks and modify it and make their own games with the basic rule saying. So that's basically what I've been doing. I did a small, simple hack of it called 211 that's essentially Armed Robbery the RPG. And currently I'm working on another couple hacks for it. One's called The Crows of Autumn, sort of set in the 1600s in Europe, and you play as essentially members of the Inquisition, this sort of secret police force that has somewhat questionable methods. And then I'm working on, consider it sort of a companion RPG, same time period, 1600s, except it's set on the coast of the New World, and it's a dark fantasy setting, so of course there are actually monsters out in the mists. And before that, as I say, I've done a few random small things on my own. I don't think there's anything particularly noteworthy. There's a lot of like small jam games for like Ludum Dare or jams the club has hosted. The University Game Development Club has hosted.
How do you feel like your experiencing making pen and paper RPGs has impacted your video game design?
So the thing I like about making pen and paper RPGs is that making them is basically just pure game design, which is one thing that makes it nice when you have other projects going, because you don't have to really dedicate yourself all the time to work on it. You can just kind of be essentially working on it in the back of your head, just thinking of game mechanics and stuff. And unlike in a video game, there's no real implementation. You don't have to at some point sit down and program it or make art for it or whatever. Well, if you want to present it, you need to make art, but you don't have to sit down and do programming to make it work. You can just making the pure game design. Now I think some of the lessons you learn in just coming up with mechanics for any system is it's kind of applicable across different types of games. One of the things in particular that I think I've taken away from working on pen and paper RPGs is using the mechanics to sort of drive or push the narrative, or using them to direct the narrative, which I think is a thing you can apply to any sort of game development if you want that sort of narrative story focus. Because in a tabletop RPG, at least the way I like them, the mechanics largely exist as a way of directing whatever story you're collaboratively telling with your friends. It's a way of saying, or the mechanics are a way of the game saying, this is what is interesting to the sorts of narratives we want to tell. And so I think that you can apply to other games as well, and sort of use the mechanics to say, this is what's going to be interesting about our game. This is what our narrative is going to focus on.
Yeah, I think one of the most famous examples of that is inventory management in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Which is completely nullified by the magic items bag of holding, and I guess the handy haversack later. But basically, it's a statement that we know that this game is not about counting your arrows and and lengths of rope. So we're going to give you a magic bag, and you can just stuff everything into it, and no one ever has to think about this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the ongoing projects and the game mechanics in there. So to give the audience an idea of when they, I guess, pop in the Mango Death Wish cartridge into their Famicom or whatever. What are they really going to be playing?
Yeah. So Mango Death Wish came about from the basic concept of making a stealth game, a local multiplayer competitive stealth game. So the idea of, you're playing multiple players, it's local multiplayer, so you're playing on the same screen, you're sharing the same screen, yet it's a stealth game, you're against each other. So this idea of everything on the screen is shared information, but you want to because it's a stealth game, you want to know where you are. You want to know things about yourself, and you want to, if you can, try and manage how much of that your opponents know, essentially. It's partially inspired by, I started playing Mark of the Ninja at the time, and just it handled stealth pretty nicely. It's a 2D side-scrolling platforming stealth game, which is essentially what Mango Deathwish is in in a local multiplayer sense, side-scrolling platforming stealth game. And just the way is partially inspired by the way Mark of the Ninja handles stealth, because in that game it makes it really clear if you're in the light or in the dark. If you're in the light, anything in the light appears colored, and everything in the black just appears as black, or everything in the dark, just appears as black with white outlines. And so there's this very clear distinction between being in the shadows and being in the light. And so part of the design, or the idea of Mango Deathwish, came from just that visual idea of having the really sharp contrast between light and shadow, and sort of having players, these ninjas, like slipping out of the complete darkness into the light. And I think in general, local multiplayer games are something that interests me. In general, I like the idea of, sitting around with friends, all playing the same game, and just having a good time, because you're all physically there hanging out rather than playing over the internet and having that distance and separation. And because of just the atmosphere of hanging out with your friends, I really like the idea of bringing hidden information, and this didn't happen in Mango Deathwish, but like the idea of hidden roles or that sort of thing into a local multiplayer game, I think it's really interesting, because you do have this thing where if the game's designed around it, as opposed to old GoldenEye stop screen watching kind of thing, if the game's designed around being local multiplayer with the knowledge that, everything on the screen everyone can see is going to be shared information. If the game's designed around that, I think you can get some really interesting interactions out of sort of what information is shared on that screen.
Yeah, you also gain the benefit. You work around the problem that you have, say, with shared screen multiplayer. Say, like in the GoldenEye age, where you're trying to shoot at your friend who's playing as Odd Job, and there's 4 of you on your old CRT television. You're trying to aim at like 7 pixels.
Yeah. And so in Mango Deathwish, it's all one screen, so we use the full space.
Yeah. Every player can see the full beautiful art.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that ended up being very effective about that concept of using the contrast between what's lit and what's dark is that it gains this sort of locked in a museum after dark kind of feeling, whereas the guard's flashlight sleeps around, you slowly reveal areas of the map, and I feel it was a very compelling experience.
Yeah. And going back to the idea of bringing in hidden roles and hidden information into local multiplayer games. Again, Mango Deathwish didn't do anything with hidden roles, but this is something that I find a lot of tabletop board games do, having this hidden information that only some players know. So yeah, I guess I just find it interesting to try and bring that into a video game space. And there are a few similarities between, I think, board games and local multiplayer games, just because they both have that idea of you're all physically there, physically sat around and present and able to interact with each other outside the game. Essentially, you can whatever. Yeah, that's I'm just showing off now.
For sure. So let's talk about the gameplay in Sunshine.
Yeah. So the basic idea behind Sunshine was to, have you, controlling a spaceship with, fighter squadron, very Battlestar Galactica inspired in that sense, and sort of. This is not really conventional because it's sci-fi. It's in the future. We don't have space battleships, but in the sense of, you know, having similarities with like modern day naval conflict or whatever, just extrapolating that into space, or just having watched a lot of sci-fi, we sort of understand space battles, so we can kind of call them conventional in a way, sort of. But this idea of like what you think of as a conventional space battle, the sort of thing you understand. Hey, we have guns on this thing we can shoot. We've got armor. We've got fighters. We know what fighters do. We know what they're about. So having these sort of conventional science fiction battles and weaponry and tactics and stuff, and then taking that and putting you against sort of enemies you don't really understand. So eldritch horrors and abominations out in space. So from a game mechanics sense, what we want to have for the player is those conventional tactics at their disposal, right? We want them to be able to command the ship around, fly it around. It should handle like a big old capital ship, not the fastest thing, and then has more mobile fighters that can fly around. It has its, point defense turrets or whatever that are covered with turrets that can just, fire out, send out the fighters for the more maneuverable precision stuff that the turrets aren't really ideal for. So that's where the player's stuff comes from mechanically. And the challenge there is to design these enemies essentially that are unconventional, you don't really understand, which of course has the issue of, you have to come up with that. And there's always a challenge of, if you can make something, you can sort of understand it. So how do you balance that? I don't know. It's the whole, or I don't know. I was going to say something and I lost where I was going with that train of thought.
Yeah, there's definitely a conceptual issue at play in making something that is uncomprehensible. Because in order to make it, you need to comprehend it at some point.
Yeah, it's like the same challenge with sort of any fiction that's dealing with like Lovecraftian horrors, things that are supposed to be beyond the imagination. Well, if you're going to show it in your fiction, or if you're going to describe it, or if you're going to think of what this creature is, well, if you can imagine it, then it's obviously not beyond the imagination.
Would you liken the gameplay in some ways to being a puzzle that you solve by flying ships around and shooting guns from fighter squadrons?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the challenges we want to have in the game is having the player figure out how they can use their conventional tactics and weaponry to affect these eldritch abominations. And so there'll be an aspect of the player sort of playing around with the tools or the abilities at their disposal, and seeing how it affects these enemies, sort of a bit of trial and error, like sussing out what exactly these effects are, and then trying to figure out how can I use these effects to do what I want. So there's a puzzle aspect in figuring out how you can interact with these enemies, I think, is part of the design goal there. And then once you figure out how you can interact with them, you then got to puzzle out how you can use those interactions to do what you want to do. Get some resources, get out of there, destroy the thing, whatever it's going to be.
So it's like a high concept real time strategy game.
Yeah, in a way.
Well, that sounds fascinating to me.
Yeah, a challenge will be if we can pull it off. Because, as you say, high concept thing, that implies, we have sort of lofty goals, something to work towards, which is always a challenge when you set yourself up with these high bars to reach.
Yeah, in my experience, the ambition pays off because even if you don't necessarily accomplish what you set out to do initially, you at least end up with something fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess we're not exactly making a typing game
Yeah.
where you learn how to type by making bugs get squished by a foot when you spell the word right.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so outside, or what's the question going to be? Now that we've covered our projects that are currently under works, what can the audience expect from you and BR Warner Studios and all the fine creative people who are attached to these projects in the future?
So in the immediate future, I think we want to get Mango Death Wish finished up by the end of the month, just to kind of get that out of the way. And then we're going to be working on Sunshine a lot throughout the summer. That'll be the big main focus. I suspect the next time an opportunity to do a jam rolls around, we'll do something for that. Personally, it's probably not the best way to work, but I like to sort of have multiple projects going. And I like occasionally just doing jams just to get something done, just to take a break from whatever else I'm working on. So I like the idea, or often work with the idea of having, or recently I guess I've been working with the idea of having, have a big project going on, which is Sunshine. I have my actual paid work because I need to pay rent, so I have that going on. I have my own personal stuff going on because I'm still working on those tabletop RPGs, and then sort of on top of that, every so often there's a jam game. And so, I have room for, one jam game maybe on top of all of that stuff. So, Mango Death Wish right now is the jam game, spending a bit of time fixing that up. And then I imagine in the future there'll be another jam game. We'll make it a game and then spend, the next month or whatever fixing it up a little. So yeah, I think the main thing, we're working on Sunshine, hoping to actually get something we can show to people. People can play, give us feedback. We can see if we're on the right track for making something fun, enjoyable, or if our idea is garbage, or if we need to redesign. We might determine that we need to, seriously redesign some of the mechanics. So that's going to be the big focus. Beyond that, finishing up Mango Death Wish, and then whatever comes along to replace that in the off times.
Well, it sounds like you're a really busy man. Is there a place on the internet that people will be able to track down all your projects?
I do have a website, a WordPress site. It's horribly out of date. I need to get into the habit of keeping it updated and regular. Just pretty bare bones at the moment. But it's it's coser.wordpress.com. And yeah, that's my website. I have a Twitter that I don't use very much. I should probably start using that more. I'm really bad at keeping up with the whole social media online presence thing. As I say, my website's terribly out of date, so I should maybe try and keep that updated recently, or keep that updated. At some point, the recent tabletop RPG stuff I've been working on, haven't really put that out there. At some point when I get my shit in gear, so to speak, when I get my act together, whatever, I'll be looking to just put 211 online somewhere for people to see, get feedback on it. When The Crows of Autumn and Out in the Mist, the other two RPGs I'm working on, when they're in a state that, or when I get them in a state that someone other than me can understand The rules, I'll be putting something online for that. I'm hoping to get more of a playtest type thing document online as opposed to a full finished thing. This would be nice to sort of make these RPGs into slightly bigger things, slightly more polished. 2.11 was sort of just a simple, light, play around with some ideas thing, as opposed to a big serious project. But maybe the other two will be more serious things. But anyways, at some point you might be able to find those online.
All right. Well, I highly encourage our audience to go bother Jonathan on social media if you're excited to hear about his stuff.
Yeah, go bother me and shoot, what's the word? Encourage me? No, not encourage me.
Cajole?
Yeah. Pressure me into actually getting stuff online, actually doing things with the whole internet idea.
Well, with that, we'll leave our listeners on the electric internet to their own pastimes. Thanks so much for taking the opportunity to talk to me about all the exciting stuff we've got in the works.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully I was coherent. That's always a hope. It's always something to strive for. Coherency. Basic coherency.
A thousand thanks for listening to this episode of Games You'll Soon Play. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jonathan as much as I did. Alright, so I loaded the front of the episode with tons of this and that about where you can see this and hear that on this thing. So I won't bother you with that now. I'm Liam Gallagher. Please go spend time with the ones you love. Just kidding. All the music that you heard on today's program was composed by me for Guess What in a Flash. Now get off my podcast. You're trampling the grass.